never forget the exact words. They weren't shouted. They weren't whispered. They were said casually, like I was less than human. Like my presence didn't even matter. "You're not real family," my husband's mother told me, her lips curling into the kind of smug smile only a woman who thinks she owns the world can give. Those words burned into my chest. They stuck worse than any insult I'd heard before, worse than any humiliation I'd endured growing up. And in that moment, while everyone at the dinner table looked at me like I was just some outsider who had somehow stumbled into their perfect little family, I felt something snap. She had no idea. No idea that those 5 words would change everything. Because if she thought I wasn't family, then fine. I'd show her what it meant to truly lose family. But maybe I should start from the beginning. I wasn't born into wealth. My parents were average, hard-working people. My dad an auto mechanic. My mom a nurse. We lived in a modest neighborhood where every neighbor knew your name, and birthdays meant potluck dinners with casseroles and homemade cakes. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was real. When I met Daniel, my husband, I never imagined I'd be standing one day in his mother's lavish dining room, surrounded by chandeliers, polished oak tables, and people who looked at me as if I'd crawled out from the dirt. Daniel was everything I wasn't: handsome, charming, raised in a wealthy family that cared about status, appearances, and lineage. He was the golden boy, the one every mother dreamed her daughter would marry. But when we met at a charity event through mutual friends, something clicked between us instantly. He didn't care that I didn't come from money. He loved that I was down to earth, that I could laugh at myself, that I didn't put on an act, and for the longest time, I thought that was enough. But then I met her, his mother, Elizabeth. From the very first introduction, I could feel it, the disapproval dripping from her eyes, the tight smile that never reached her face, the way her words were always polite enough in public, but carried blades beneath their surface. "Oh, so you're the girl Daniel's been talking about," she said when we first met, her tone sweet, but her eyes scanning me like I was merchandise she wouldn't buy. "You're not quite what I pictured." I should have walked away then. But I was in love. The first year of marriage was manageable. She made her little comments about my cooking, about how I dressed, about how I didn't carry myself like a wife from their circle. But Daniel and I had each other, and he always promised, "Don't listen to her, babe. She'll come around." Except she didn't come around. She circled me like a hawk, waiting for me to slip, and the worst part, her disapproval wasn't hidden. She wanted me to know I didn't belong to family gatherings. She'd always seat me at the far end of the table, next to the relatives nobody talked to. When they toasted to family, her eyes would slide right past me. When friends asked her about her new daughter-in-law, she'd say, "Oh yes, Daniel got married, but you know how boys are. They make their own choices." It was subtle, until the night it wasn't. The night of that humiliating dinner, when she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not real family." I still remember the clinking of forks stopping mid-air, Daniel's hand tightening on his glass, his knuckles white. The silence that followed. And then, the worst part, no one defended me. Not even him. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I promised myself something. If I wasn't real family, then she wouldn't be either. And that was the beginning of everything. When I first became Daniel's wife, I told myself I'd win her over. I'd be patient, respectful, kind. After all, she was his mother, the woman who raised the man I loved. If she mattered to him, then she'd matter to me. I cooked her favorite meals, even though she never once finished a plate I made. I dressed up for family dinners, even though her eyes always darted to the jewelry I didn't have, the labels I couldn't afford. I even went with her to her weekly charity meetings, where she'd introduce me with a smile that never touched her eyes. This is Daniel's wife. She's new to our circle. Not my daughter-in-law. Not our family. Just Daniel's wife. T first. I brushed it off. But as the weeks turned into months, the little cuts added up. One night we were at her house for dinner. I had spent the whole day making homemade lasagna, my mom's recipe, a dish that had always been a family favorite growing up. I thought maybe, just maybe, if she tasted a piece of my world, she'd soften. She took one bite, chewed, paused, then placed her fork down with a delicate clink. Interesting, she said flatly. But in this family, we used to finer cuisine. Daniel, you really should take your wife to more upscale restaurants. She has potential, but her background shows background. That word sliced deeper than she knew. I wanted to scream. I'm not embarrassed of where I came from. But Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, and I swallowed my pride. Later that night, I told him, she hates me. No matter what I do, she'll never accept me. She doesn't hate you, he said softly, brushing my hair back from my face. She has expectations. She'll see how amazing you are. Give her time. But time didn't help. Every family holiday became a battlefield I wasn't prepared for. Thanksgiving, she'd make sure to remind me that her stuffing recipe was the real family tradition. Christmas, she'd buy me expensive perfume I couldn't afford to reciprocate, just so I'd feel small. And birthdays, those were the worst. On my birthday, she gave me a card. Just a card. Inside, in perfect, elegant handwriting, she'd written, "To Daniel's wife. Wishing you a pleasant year ahead." No love, no warmth, not even my name. I tried to laugh it off, but deep down, it was crushing me. The real breaking point came during one of her ladies' luncheons. She invited her friends over, women with diamond rings the size of grapes, and hair sprayed into helmets. I sat at the table, quiet, trying not to say the wrong thing. And then she did it. She looked at me with that smile and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You know, Daniel's wife tries very hard. She comes from humble beginnings, but she's learning. Maybe one day she'll be able to carry herself like a real part of the family." The table erupted in polite laughter. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. When we got home, I finally broke. "Daniel, she humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you even care? Do you realize how she makes me feel?" His jaw clenched. Of course I care. But she's my mother. What do you want me to do? Cut her out of my life? And there it was, the truth. He loved me, but he was still under her thumb. That night, I cried myself to sleep. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, one thought kept circling my mind. If she wanted me to feel like an outsider, maybe I'd stop trying to be an insider. Maybe I'd show her what happens when the woman she tried to push away decides to stop begging for approval. After that night, something inside me changed. I used to think love meant winning over everyone in his life. That if I worked hard enough, dressed well enough, cooked fancy enough, I could force his family to accept me. But lying there, in the dark, with Daniel asleep beside me and my chest aching from holding in tears, I realized something. I had been fighting the wrong battle. It wasn't about winning her approval. It was about taking back my dignity. The very next morning, I did something I hadn't done since I got married. I pulled out my resume. Before marrying Daniel, I had worked in marketing. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it. I was creative. I understood people, and I had a knack for turning ideas into sales. When we got married, I'd let that part of me fade. I thought my job was to fit into his world, to learn the ways of his family. But clearly, that world wasn't going to embrace me. So why should I waste myself trying? I sent out resumes. I made calls. Within 2 weeks, I landed a position at a mid-sized firm. It wasn't the highest salary, but it was mine. My space. My independence. When I told Daniel, his face lit up. That's amazing, babe. I'm proud of you. But when his mother found out, she raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, you're working again? I suppose Daniel's income isn't sufficient." I smiled politely, but inside, I laughed. If only she knew this wasn't about money. This was about freedom. The job was demanding, but I thrived. I stayed late, brainstormed campaigns, and praise from my boss. Slowly, my confidence returned. I started walking taller, smiling more, carrying myself with the kind of strength Elizabeth could never take credit for. And Daniel noticed. One night, he came home to find me at the kitchen table, surrounded by sketches and notes. He leaned down, kissed my temple, and said, "You look alive. I haven't seen you this happy in months." Alive. That word meant more than he realized. Of course, Elizabeth didn't take my growth lightly. At the next family dinner, she made her move. "So," she said, swirling her wine, "you've joined the working class again. How quaint. But tell me, dear, doesn't that take away from your duties as a wife?" The table fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I could have shrunk back. I could have let her words stab me the way they always had. But this time I smiled. "Actually, Elizabeth, it adds to them. Because when I succeed, Daniel succeeds. We're a team." The flicker in her eyes, surprise, maybe even fear, was small, but I caught it. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. That night, as we drove home, Daniel squeezed my hand. "You know," he said softly, "I've never been prouder of you than I was tonight." And in that moment, I realized something even more important than my independence. Elizabeth had spent years trying to make me small. But the stronger I became, the closer Daniel and I grew. The tighter we held onto each other, and slowly, I was taking him away from her, not by force, not by manipulation, but simply by being the woman she swore I could never be. What I didn't know yet was how far Elizabeth would go to stop that, and how her own schemes would eventually backfire, turning my quiet strength into the very weapon that would undo her. Elizabeth was like a queen who'd ruled her kingdom for decades, and suddenly, someone new had dared to walk into her castle, not bow and worse, start winning hearts. She wasn't about to let that stand. The more confidence I gained, the more vicious her little games became. At first, it was whispers. I'd hear from Daniel's cousins that she was spreading rumors. "She's only with Daniel for the money," or "she's trying to climb the social ladder by using him." Never mind that I had a job now, that I paid my own bills, that I was building something for myself. In her eyes, I was still an intruder, a fraud. One evening at a family barbecue, she pulled Daniel aside. I didn't mean to overhear, but her voice carried across the lawn. "Son, you can't honestly think she's your equal. You've always deserved better. She's fine for now, but in the long run, she'll hold you back." I froze, paper plate in hand. My heart pounded in my ears. Daniel's answer came sharp and clear. Enough mom. I love her. She's my wife. And if you can't respect that, maybe we shouldn't come to these gatherings anymore. The silence that followed was delicious. For the first time, he didn't just defend me privately, he stood up to her openly. Her face turned red, her lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing, and in that silence, I felt something shift. But Elizabeth wasn't done. If words couldn't break me, maybe sabotage could. At work, I was leading a pitch for a big client. It was the kind of account that could make my career skyrocket. I worked nights, poured everything into the presentation. The day before the meeting, I left my laptop at the house when Danielle and I went over for Sunday dinner. When I came back to grab it, I noticed something odd. Files were missing. My entire pitch deck was gone. I panicked. I tore through every folder, every backup vanished. At first, I thought it was a glitch, until I remembered the way Elizabeth had been hovering near my bag earlier, pretending to tidy up. I'll never forget her smirk that evening as she poured herself wine. Such a shame when technology fails us, but maybe it's for the best. Don't stress yourself too much with work, dear. Focus on your marriage instead. My blood boiled. She'd done it. I knew it in my bones, but I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. Instead, I smiled sweetly and said, "You're right, Elizabeth. Thank you for the advice. Because here's the thing about me. When I'm backed into a corner, I don't crumble. I climb." I stayed up all night rebuilding my pitch from scratch. And the next morning, fueled by nothing but coffee and sheer willpower, I walked into that boardroom and nailed it. The client signed with us on the spot. When Daniel hugged me that night, so proud he nearly lifted me off my feet, I thought of her words, "You're not real family." And I realized she was right. I wasn't her family. I was becoming something bigger, something she could never control. But Elizabeth? She didn't see it that way. In her mind, my success was proof I was dangerous. Proof I was pulling her precious son further away from her daughters. Oh, she decided to go further. Much further. And what she tried next would nearly destroy everything until I turned it back on her. If Elizabeth's whispers and little games had been annoying before, what came next was war. It started with money. Danielle and I had opened a joint savings account to put aside money for a future home, something modest, something ours. We talked about starting a family one day, and those savings meant everything to me. Every dollar I added from my new job felt like proof that I was contributing, that I was building something for us. One afternoon, I logged in to transfer funds. My heart skipped. The balance was off. Several $1,000s were missing. I stared at the screen, cold panic running through me. Had we been hacked? Did I make a mistake? When Daniel came home, I showed him. He frowned, confusion clouding his face. "That's weird. Let me call the bank." Minutes later, his expression changed: anger, embarrassment, something else I couldn't quite read. "My mother withdrew it," he said slowly. I blinked. "What? She has access? I put her on the account years ago, before we got married. Just in case of emergencies." My stomach dropped. And she thought our savings was an emergency. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Apparently, she needed it for some unexpected expenses. She said she'll put it back. Put it back. As if our future home, our plans, our security were just pocket change she could borrow at will." I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand he march over there and cut her off. But instead, I took a deep breath and said, "Daniel, it's time. You need to choose. Me or her." The silence between us was heavy. He loved me, But he was still tethered to her in ways I couldn't untangle. Finally, he whispered, "Give me time. Time. Always time." But Elizabeth wasn't content with just taking our money. The next strike came at a family gathering. She cornered Daniel in the kitchen, her voice hushed but sharp enough to cut through the hum of conversation. "You're losing yourself in her. She's using you, Daniel. Everyone can see it. You've changed since marrying her, and not for the better." I froze just outside the doorway, my heart clenched, waiting for him to stay silent. Or worse, agree. But instead, his voice rang out steady. "You're wrong, Mom. I have changed. Because I've grown up. Because I finally know what it means to love someone who loves me back. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you don't really want what's best for me." The crash of glass shattering followed. She'd dropped her wine glass. I slipped away before she saw me listening, but my chest swelled with pride. For the first time, Daniel had drawn a line. Still, Elizabeth was relentless. She couldn't stand losing control, and her final weapon was the cruelest yet. She began spreading lies, not about me this time, but about my family. She told Daniel's relatives that my father had a criminal record, that my mother had begged her son for money. None of it was true. But in her world, truth didn't matter, perception did. When I heard the rumors trickling back to me, I sat in silence, rage boiling beneath my calm expression. She wasn't just attacking me anymore. She was attacking the people who raised me. The people who had nothing to do with this. That night, I looked at Daniel across the dinner table, his face tired, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his mother's chaos, and I decided something. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg anymore. Elizabeth had declared war, and I was going to end it. I used to think revenge had to be loud screaming matches, broken plates, dramatic walkouts. But sitting there that night, listening to the poison Elizabeth had spread about my family, I realized something far more dangerous. Revenge could be quiet. Revenge could be patient. Revenge could look like success, and the best revenge of all wasn't destroying someone outright. It was making them watch while you became everything they swore you could never be. The first step was simple. Stop trying to belong in her world and start building my own. 80 work. I threw myself into projects. Late nights, bold pitches, risks no one else dared to take. And it paid off. Within 6 months, I wasn't just an employee, I was being eyed for a leadership position. My name started circulating in the industry. People began calling me directly, asking for my expertise, and slowly, I built a network that had nothing to do with Elizabeth, her society friends, or her influence. The irony? The more successful I became, the more Daniel admired me. He'd come home, listen to me excitedly talk about my day, and I could see it in his eyes: pride, love, respect, the very things Elizabeth was losing. Of course, she noticed. One evening, we attended a family event. As usual, she tried to seat me at the far end of the table, next to the quiet uncle who never spoke. But this time, one of Daniel's cousins, a woman I'd helped with a small business campaign, stood up and said, "Oh no, she has to sit with us. She's the one who gave me that amazing advice. You're incredible." Elizabeth's smile froze. I slid into my new seat, directly across from her. For once, people weren't leaning toward her for stories, they were leaning toward me, and the look in her eyes? Fury. Pure fury. The second step was Daniel. He had always loved me, but he was still tied to her strings. I knew if I wanted true freedom, I couldn't just strengthen myself, I had to strengthen us. So I started being honest with him. Not pleading, not accusing. Just telling him calmly what his mother's words did to me. Daniel, when she says, "I'm not family," it makes me feel invisible. It makes me wonder if I'll ever be enough in this house. His jaw would clench. His eyes would soften. And slowly, I could see the scales tipping. He stopped answering her calls as quickly. He stopped rushing to her side every time she snapped her fingers. And he started choosing me. Dinner plans with her. "Sorry, mom, we're busy." Her snide remarks at gatherings. "Mom, that's enough." Every choice, every small defense, it was like cutting one more thread from the strings she tied around him. The third step. Patience. I didn't lash out when she spread rumors. I didn't scream when she stole our savings. I didn't storm out when she dismissed me at dinners. I smiled. I worked harder. I built higher. And I let her watch as the very sun she tried to keep clutched in her hands drifted closer and closer to me, because the cruelest revenge isn't a single strike. It's 1,000 little cuts to the ego, and Elizabeth's ego was bleeding. But what I didn't know was that she wasn't done fighting. She was preparing her boldest move yet, one that would risk tearing everything apart. And when she made it, I'd finally have to decide whether I was going to just defend myself or end this once and for all. The next few days felt like a storm quietly building in the distance. I went about my work, attended my classes, and came home to cook dinners as usual, but underneath it all, my heart carried the heaviness of what had been said and the simmering anger that came with it. Yet, amid all the noise of my emotions, something was shifting between me and Daniel. Subtle, but powerful. One evening, after he came home from work, I noticed him sitting on the edge of our bed, holding his head in his hands. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled, and he looked nothing like the polished, confident man the world saw. "Rough day?" I asked gently, walking over. He glanced up at me with tired eyes. "You could say that. But it's not just work. It's everything. I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions. Mom wants one thing, you deserve another, and I." His voice trailed off. I sat beside him, slipping my hand into his. "Daniel, I never wanted you to feel like you had to choose. I wanted us to build a family that was ours, where love, not obligation, defined it." His eyes softened. "Do you really think that's possible? With everything happening?" I smiled faintly, though my heart ached. "It depends on whether you want it badly enough. Family doesn't have to be who we're born to, it's who shows up, who loves, who supports. And Daniel, I will always show up for you. Even when it's hard." He stared at me like he was seeing me in a new light. "You really mean that, don't you?" I squeezed his hand. Every word. That night, for the first time in a long time, Daniel kissed me like he meant it, not out of routine, not out of habit, but with a spark that reminded me of the man I'd married. It was as though, just for that moment, the world outside ceased to matter, but reality had a way of creeping back in. The following Sunday, we were invited to yet another family dinner. I braced myself for the inevitable barbs from his mother, but Danielle surprised me when she commented snidely about how I wasn't eating much, insinuating that real family meals required hearty appetites. Daniel put down his fork and said, "Family, mom, enough. I won't sit here and let you insult my wife." The room went silent. His brother stared, his father cleared his throat, and his mother's eyes widened in shock. "Daniel," she began. "No," he cut her off. "This ends now. If you can't respect her, then you can't expect me to keep coming here. She is my wife." That makes her family, whether you like it or not. I nearly choked on my breath. I hadn't expected him to defend me so openly, so boldly. His mother's lips pressed into a thin line, her pride wounded. You would choose her over me, your odd mother. Daniel's voice was calm, but resolute. I'm not choosing one over the other. I'm choosing respect. And if you can't give that, then yes, don't be surprised if we stop showing up. For the first time, she had no words. She simply sat back, glaring at me like I had somehow bewitched her son. Inside, I felt a mix of emotions: pride, relief, fear. Because while Daniel had finally taken a stand, I knew this was just the beginning. His mother wasn't the type to let go quietly, and deep down, a part of me began to prepare not just for more battles, but for a reckoning. Because if she kept pushing, if she kept trying to erase me from my own marriage, then she was going to learn that I was not the fragile, quiet girl she thought I was. I was stronger than she ever imagined. And I was about to prove it. When we finally got home that evening, I collapsed onto the couch, hugging a pillow as if it could shield me from the day's poison. Mark sat beside me, rubbing his temples like the weight of his mother's drama had left a migraine. I can't believe she said that, I whispered, still shaking. In front of everyone. She basically declared I'm not family, like I'm some outsider stealing you away. Mark wrapped his arm around me. Don't let her words cut you, Sarah. She's bitter. She's scared of losing control. That's all this is about. You're my wife, my family. No one can take that away. His words meant the world, but the sting of his mother's public humiliation lingered deep in my bones. I wanted to believe it didn't matter, that her opinion carried no weight in my life, but the truth, it did. Because whether I liked it or not, her disdain trickled into every holiday, every dinner, every decision Mark and I made, and I wasn't naive. Resentment could poison a marriage faster than infidelity if left unchecked. Later that night, as I washed my face in the bathroom mirror, I looked myself in the eyes. No more letting her walk over me, I whispered. If she wants war, fine. But I won't fight with tantrums or insults. I'll fight with my life, my dignity, my success, my love. It was like flipping a switch inside me. The next day, I started pulling my focus back into things I'd neglected: my career, my independence, my passions. I updated my RSM, began exploring opportunities, and even signed up for a night class in finance. If his mother thought I was just the woman hanging on to her son, I would prove that not only was I more than that, I was unstoppable. Meanwhile, Mark tried to smooth things over with his family. He went to visit his mom midweek. When he came back, his face was tight, jaw clenched. She refuses to apologize, he said flatly. Of course she does, I replied. People like her don't say sorry. They double down. She said you're trying to separate me from the family, that you've brainwashed me. I laughed bitterly. Brainwashed? Please. You're a grown man. You make your own choices. I told her exactly that. I told her if she couldn't respect you, she doesn't respect me. But he trailed off, pressing his palms against his eyes. She started crying, guilt-tripping me, saying I was abandoning her after everything she's done for me. There it was again, the invisible leash she used to tug at him. Guilt, obligation, manipulation. Mark looked at me helplessly, and for the first time, I realized he was as much a victim as I was. His whole life, she had conditioned him to feel like her needs came before his. And while I had married him, I had also unknowingly married into that cycle. That night, I made a decision. If I wanted to secure our marriage and our future, I had to break that cycle, not by begging for her approval, not by shrinking myself to fit her definition of real family, but by showing her and everyone else that I didn't need her acceptance, that I could build a life so solid, so fulfilling, that her words would crumble into dust compared to the reality of who I was. Little did I know, that moment of resolve was the beginning of a plan that would eventually turn the tables completely, leaving his mother stunned in ways she never saw coming. The days after Daniel walked out of his mother's house were a strange mix of peace and turbulence. Peace, because for the first time in our marriage, there were no midnight phone calls from Evelyn, no sudden demands to drop everything and rush to her side, no manipulative guilt trips designed to make Daniel feel torn. But turbulence, because I knew deep down that Evelyn was not the kind of woman who accepted defeat quietly, and I was right. It started small little things that only Daniel and I would notice. For instance, we'd run into a few of his old friends at the market, and they'd act strangely cold, almost dismissive. One even muttered something like, "Guess you're too good for your own family now." I could feel the heat of Daniel's shame as he quickly ended the conversation. Evelyn was working behind the scenes, spreading a narrative about me. Soon, word got around that I was the selfish wife who stole her son away from his family. Evelyn, apparently, was telling everyone in her circle that I manipulated Daniel, poisoned him against her, and even forced him to abandon her in her time of need. At first, Daniel brushed it off, but I saw the way it ate at him. He didn't want to admit it, but Evelyn's disapproval, no matter how toxic, still hurt him. "She's still my MOM," he'd whisper late at night, lying awake. "Even if she's wrong, she's still my MOM." I understood. Truly I did. But there was a part of me, the part that had endured Evelyn's cruelty for years, that wanted him to see the truth. That blood doesn't give someone a free pass to destroy you. Then came the first real crack in Evelyn's facade. One Sunday morning, as I was prepping breakfast, Daniel walked into the kitchen with a letter in his hand. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. He placed it on the counter in front of me. "What's this?" I asked. "Read it," he said shortly. It was a handwritten note, signed by Evelyn herself. But instead of a heartfelt attempt to apologize or reconnect, it was a venomous rant. She accused me of brainwashing her son, of tearing apart their family, of trying to steal her bloodline. She went as far as to call me an outsider, unworthy of carrying her grandchildren one day. My stomach turned. The words were crueler than anything she had ever said to my face. But what caught my attention most wasn't the insults, it was a single line near the end. "You may think you've won now, but I know my son. He'll come back to me, because you'll never be enough." I looked up at Daniel, my heart pounding. His eyes were red, his fists clenched. "I can't believe she wrote this," he whispered. I thought maybe she'd calm down eventually. But this is evil. For the first time, I saw something shift in him. A crack. Not in his loyalty to his mother, but in the blind hope he'd been holding onto that she'd change. He folded the letter, shoved it back in the envelope, and tossed it into the trash with a force that made me jump. "That's it," he said firmly. "I'm done chasing her approval. If she wants me back, it won't be because she guilted me into it. It'll be because she finally realizes what she's lost." Hearing him say those words was like a weight lifting off my chest. I had waited years for Daniel to finally see what I had seen from the start, But Evelyn wasn't finished. A week later, we found out she had shown up unannounced at Daniel's workplace. She stormed into his office and demanded to speak with him. When security tried to escort her out, she made a scene in the lobby, shouting accusations about me in front of his colleagues. Daniel was mortified but also furious. That night, he told me he'd filed an official no-contact order through HR, making it clear she was no longer welcome near his work. Still, Evelyn was relentless. Late at night, she began leaving voicemails on Daniel's phone. At first, they were angry and accusatory, but soon they turned pitiful, almost desperate. "Danny, sweetheart, you know she's just trying to come between us. You'll see it one day. You'll regret leaving me. I'm your mother." Nothing can change that. It was manipulation in its purest form. But Daniel didn't cave this time. He blocked her number, deleted her messages, and for the first time since I'd known him, chose us over her without hesitation. It felt like we had finally won. But deep down, I knew Evelyn well enough to understand one thing: she wasn't giving up. She was biding her time, and the next move she made would shake everything. The night of the annual family gala arrived. It was the kind of event Evelyn loved: chandeliers, expensive dresses, the smell of power and influence in the air. And naturally, she had invited herself to ensure she could keep an eye on her son and me. I knew she would be there. I also knew she expected the usual: me nervous, trying too hard, shrinking in the corner while she flaunted control. But this time, nothing could have been further from the truth. I arrived with Daniel, wearing a tailored dress that caught the light in just the right way, exuding confidence, success, and authority. Daniel's hand was firm around mine, his pride obvious in the way he introduced me. "Everyone, this is my wife, Sarah," he said, his voice strong. "She's built incredible things on her own, and I'm lucky to have her by my side." Whispers ran through the crowd. Eyes widened. And then I saw it: Elizabeth's face. Pale, tight-lipped, a mask of disbelief. She expected me to stumble, to falter, to let her son slip back under her spell. Instead, I smiled. I spent the evening gracefully networking, speaking with people I had helped in my career, and quietly showing just how influential I had become. Every nod, every compliment, every handshake was a reminder that I had built a world that Elizabeth had no control over. Then came the final moment. The event's host called for speeches. I was introduced as a special guest for my achievements in business. As I walked to the stage, I felt Elizabeth's gaze burn through me, her hands clenching into fists. I smiled down at the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for having me tonight. This year has been incredible, not just professionally, but personally. I've realized that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love, respect, and support. And in my life, that's exactly what I've found with Daniel." The room erupted in applause. Daniel stood beside me, eyes shining, proud and unwavering. And then, the moment that would mark the ultimate reversal, I dedicated my next few words not just to the crowd, but directly toward Elizabeth. Some people believe that controlling others proves their worth. But real strength, real power, it comes from lifting others, not tearing them down. And tonight, I'm proud to say that I'm building a life where no one can diminish me, not even those who once claimed to be family. Elizabeth's lips parted, stunned. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words never came. Every guest was now seeing her for what she truly was: bitter, manipulative, powerless against the woman she had tried to destroy. Daniel squeezed my hand. "You've done this beautifully," he whispered. I smiled back. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from her cruelty, but from the fear she'd instilled in me. She had tried to make me small, tried to separate us, tried to humiliate me, take my money, manipulate my husband, and yet here I was, stronger, united, unstoppable. Elizabeth finally turned and left the gala early, her aura of superiority shattered, her schemes failing, one by one in front of the very people she had tried to impress. As we watched her go, Daniel wrapped his arm around me. "She'll never be able to do this again," he said softly. "No," I agreed. "Because the real family is here. Us. And no one can take that away." In that moment, I realized that revenge wasn't about cruelty. It wasn't about shouting, screaming, or humiliating her in return. It was about building a life so strong, so full, so undeniable, that the people who once doubted you were forced to see your worth. And that, at last, was the sweetest revenge of all. And that's how I finally broke free from her control, reclaimed my life, and showed that real family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love, respect, and loyalty. Sometimes the people who claim to know you the best are the ones who try to tear you down the most. But the power isn't in their words or their manipulation, it's in how you respond. I didn't need to yell, fight, or prove myself in their eyes. I just needed to rise, to build a life that no one could touch, and to love the people who truly mattered. And as I look back now, I realize the greatest revenge isn't humiliation or payback, it's living well, loving fully, and letting success speak louder than their cruelty ever could. So to anyone out there dealing with family drama, toxic in-laws, or people who try to diminish you, keep building, keep loving, and keep believing in yourself. Because in the end, your life and your happiness is the ultimate victory. Thanks for watching. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy.